This evening we have with us Stephen Erlanger, who is the London Bureau Chief for the New York Times. Mr. Erlanger has reported in over 120 countries, and he is the recipient of numerous awards in journalistic excellence, including the Pulitzer Prize for his explanatory reporting of Al-Qaeda. We just had the discussion on the Super Tuesday results. So Alex, would you like to?
Yeah, so I wanted to just start by, challenging a couple points of media sort of orthodoxy that have appeared during the campaign. The first point is that the media has been really shocked and surprised. There's a lot of disbelief about the rise of Trump. And in a sense, if we look at him, he's kind of like Berlusconi rolled into the playbook of Marine Le Pen in France and the rise of the National Front. And so the first question is, why is the media so surprised? Was this not sort of coming our way, the rise of a radical populist party in the US? And the second point is, his comments have also been perceived as mistakes. Are they really mistakes, or has he just been very astute about knowing who his voter base is and what message is going to connect with them?
I don't usually think of the media as a collective because it's very varied. But I think in this case, it's true, the media generally was surprised. Why? Partly because we're actually fairly conventional thinkers, which is part of the problem. I mean, there's an issue about the same sorts of people in the media. That's less true now with social media and blogs and so on. But I think it is surprising. I mean, to have someone so vulgar, so noisy, so willing to say whatever comes into his head, to offend all sorts of people, breaks taboos of political rhetoric that I find shocking, and I think many people do too. It's made him popular, but it's also, I think, people knew there was anger about inequality and jobs. I mean, at the same time, the economy is not so bad. Unemployment's 5%, but there really is if I can characterize it, a white male anger at the way the world is going and the way the United States seems to be going that Trump has really tapped into.
And so you were a Paris bureau chief before you came to London, and it seems like Trump has assembled the same sort of coalition that the National Front has assembled, in the sense that voters who used to vote for the French Communist Party, and Trump is tapping into the same anti-globalization sentiment.
In a way, yes, but of course, France really is a very different place, and Trump's father wasn't running the National Front before him, and we don't have the same problems of identity and integration that the French do. We don't have laïcité. We don't have lots of things. We're a much more accommodating culture of migrants. That's our myth. So I'm not sure that's an exact parallel, but what does work is that anger of people who've suffered from globalization, who have suffered because factories have shut, because output has moved abroad, not just to China, of course, but to Turkey, to Cambodia, lots of places. People who don't see their lives getting better, who don't see their children's lives getting better, who feel that the United States is not as respected in the world. All that is parallel to what drives Marine Le Pen. I'm not sure these people, were left-wing in the same way. I mean, in France, the far left and the far right are kissing cousins. In America, we don't really have either one.
Right, that's true. And so if we think about the way that the media has responded to his candidacy, then being vulgar and over the top in ways we haven't seen before, there also seems to be a shift in the way the media has chosen to cover him. The New York Times wrote today in an editorial that he was a shady, bombastic liar, which it was surprising for me to see the New York Times in particular come out so strongly. It seems like they've chosen to think that covering him objectively means something completely different than taking a nonpartisan stance.
Well, the other thing you should remember is we really do keep a division between the editorial opinion of the paper and our reporting. I mean, what you're citing is an editorial written by editorial writers, not by reporters. And the reporters are having a very difficult time because they're trying to be, as balanced as they can be, to be analytical, to be cold. I think part of the problem is he's intimidated so many people. I mean, if you look at his rallies, any sort of source of criticism is met with insult, and people gather around protesters. These are not journalists who are protesting, but they gather around them and they yell Trump, 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 and it's actually a little terrifying, frankly. So I think, we've had a hard time. Have we done a perfect job? No. We started covering Hillary Clinton a very long time ago, and we've only caught up with Trump more recently. But as I said downstairs, I'm not sure Trump himself expected to get this far along in the process. So I think it's been a learning experience for everybody.
Well, and do you think because Trump has been one of his latest lines is about expanding libel laws to allow people to go after the press more easily for things they write. He has been quite restrictive with allowing press at his events. He's treating access sort of as a token, a bargaining chip, because he loves bargaining. Is there a conflict of interest then that comes into play where Trump is kind of clickbait dream, but at the same time he's dangling access?
Well, what he's doing is he's running a television campaign. Everybody's running a television campaign. If you're a mainstream print media, it's not new that you're having trouble getting time and attention. People aren't interested. And, candidates see it as riskier to sit down with someone like me in a tape recorder than to go live on TV. So that, those have been restricted. He's actually opened himself up to all kinds of interviews. The man loves to talk about himself.
That's certainly true.
But media management is gotten very sophisticated, I have to say, and it's hard to break through it. Have we asked always the right questions? Hard to know. You have a question?
Yeah, so Super Tuesday is a tremendously important date in the US political calendar, and it's the first real test of a presidential candidate's national electability. So does it worry you that the Republicans have not been able to stop the Trump train, so to speak? And do you have the sense that they wish that they could travel back in time to 9 months ago and stop it before it became such a huge thing?
Well, it's not for me to worry one way or another, but I'm surprised. One of the things that interests me is the implosion of the Republican Party. I expected Jeb Bush to do better, not necessarily to win, but to last longer and to have a bigger impact. He turned out to be a very weak candidate. Cruz, for him, the other disappointment I think for the Republicans is that Rubio, who they settled on as the next best candidate, hasn't done very well. He's come in third or second most places. The only state I think he's won now is Minnesota, and that was caucuses. There'll be a big test in 2 weeks when Florida votes, because Florida is a winner-take-all state. He's from Florida. If he loses to Trump there, I think it's really over. But it would be a fight for the delegates, and one of our panelists said, I think quite rightly, that some candidates are staying in to try to deny Trump enough votes so that the convention is contested. And in a contested convention, different things can happen.
To follow up really quickly on the Republican Party, do you think they can ever stitch their coalition back together? Because they imagined that they had this coalition that pretty much coalesced around, small government, orthodox conservatism, and in fact, that half of it is this completely different set of beliefs. The people that are following Trump and the traditional
Trump's not a traditional anything, which is the point, really. He ran in the Republican race. He could have run as a Democrat in some ways. I think if he loses, it'll be a lot like the Goldwater experience, which, extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice, was the famous Goldwater line. And people saw him as very hard right and very conservative. And he lost, and the party recouped and moved on. So I think if Trump loses, the party will gather again. If he wins, he will change the party, there's no question, because of the power of the presidency. And obviously the people running for the Senate and Congress this time really are going to have to gauge how their own fate fits with the Trump with a Trump candidacy for presidents. It's a lot like the Labour Party here and Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, how do the MPs respond? I mean, is their best bet to go with Corbyn or to fight Corbyn? I mean, or to keep their distance from Corbyn? It's the same problem, I think.
And if Trump wins, how do you think he will change the GOP? Will he change it to the extent that it is no longer recognizable?
Well, I don't think he's going to win, but I may be wrong. If he does win, he will definitely change it because the party has to rule, and so and he'll have the big bully pulpit, and he'll have a lot of impact in terms of who he chooses for his cabinet and the kinds of legislation that he picks. The Republican Party has changed a lot anyway. I mean, in the history of America, it's already changed a lot. I don't think parties, stop changing, but my expectation is that if he does get the nomination, he will run a fairly close race and lose, and the Republicans will go, thank God, and move on to somebody else.
So maybe we should move on to the Democrats. So Sanders has been completely dominant with the 18 to 35 demographic. He's been winning anywhere between 75 and 85% of the vote. I've only been following politics for the past 3 elections, including this one, but has there ever been a candidate in the recent past who's been just so crushingly dominant with the youth?
Clinton was pretty popular, I think. It is fascinating. One of the things that strikes me is how old everybody is, and what is Sanders...
And the oldest guy is winning the youngest votes.
Well, exactly. So, what is he really appealing to is the question, right? And I think, he says the system stinks, it's unfair, it's unequal, it's too corporate, there's not enough social justice, we need to change it. Now, these are things that kids like anyway, young people. It's always been a very strong wing of the Democratic Party. It has rarely been a majority wing of the Democratic Party, and I don't think it's a majority wing now.
Although it arguably propelled Obama to his victories.
It helped, but also helped blacks and Hispanics, right?
Right.
So it's anyway. It changes, but I think what's driving people now is the sense that my future doesn't look very good, and it's because of the system which is, stacked against me. And there are also, at the same time, a lot of older white guys who feel that the system stacked against them too, in terms of unions and factories closing and too much stuff being made in Asia. And you have this conjunction, which has made Sanders very popular, while Hillary seems truly establishment. The odd thing about Hillary is how high her negatives are. People don't trust her. And to me, one of the most interesting things has been the way young women have broken for Sanders, rather than the only, woman candidate in the race. And as I say, if that means that young women feel their path is clearer to a good future in America, regardless of gender, that's great. But, I'm not sure what it means. I think partly it just means that they're attracted to the Sanders ideas, and they see Hillary as part of the establishment and, too corrupted by power and Goldman Sachs.
Part of the attraction seems to be to not having a negative reaction to the word socialist, which this only is applicable to a certain demographic, but it seems like lots of young people have friends who study abroad and they associate socialism.
No, I think that's true, but
Europe and not with the Soviet Union.
Bernie Sanders isn't a real socialist. Let's be honest.
So why does he call himself actually a socialist and not a social democrat?
Well, he really is a democratic socialist. He's more of a Scandinavian type. But he actually grew up quite left-wing. This kibbutz that he was on in Israel was very close to the Soviet Union. It was years and years and years ago. It was, in the I mean, the ideology of the kibbutz started in the 20s and 30s, right? I mean, but he's always been very attracted to social justice, to collectivism, to societies that are built on a degree of fairness and socialism. That's true. But in his own career, I think, you'd call him on the left wing of the Democratic Party. I mean, Gore Vidal used to joke and say we have one party in America called the Property Party, and has a left wing and a right wing. I don't think that's true of Bernie Sanders, but I think Gore Vidal, who's dead, would be shocked by how popular Bernie Sanders has been and be very pleased by it.
Leading on from that, there was an article in the Huffington Post where one of the writers said that Hillary has used up most of her ammo and doesn't even know what kind of trouble she's in. What do you think of this? Do you think she's going to start feeling the burn, or is she in the clear?
She's very hard to read. I think she's going to get the nomination. And part of what she has to decide is if Trump is running against her, what kind of campaign to run. Or does she get down dirty with Trump, or does she try to say, it's a dignified office and I'm going to be dignified? I think the numbers tend to favor the Democrats anyway, but her vulnerabilities are real, and Sanders has pointed out to some of them, and Trump is going to be quite vicious to try to get under her skin, and it's not hard to get under her skin. She gets very defensive, and she's been in public life for so long. I mean, there are lots of ways to attack her, and she has changed her position on lots of things. So I think, if I had to bet now, I'd still bet on a President Clinton, but it's early days yet.
And how do you think she pulls in the Sanders supporters who, on Facebook, I've seen a lot of back and forth with people pledging that it's really Sanders or bust for them, that they will not vote for Hillary Clinton?
Well, I mean,
Bernie or bust.
What you may have are people who are fervent on both sides who stay home, because turnout may be low, and some of these people may not want to vote for Clinton, but they're certainly not going to vote for Trump. It's hard to imagine a Sanders voter voting for Trump. It's possible, I suppose. And there's a lot of mainstream Republicans who won't vote for Clinton, but won't vote for Trump either, and will stay home. I think, how they're old, and both of them, and who they pick as their vice presidential candidates, I think, would be really interesting. I mean, Professor Turbowitz feels very strongly that Hillary will pick a white man because she has trouble with Pennsylvania and white men. I don't know. I mean, it gets very cynical at this stage where people look at where they really need votes. And frankly, if she feels Sanders supporters won't vote for Trump, she might spend a little less time worrying about them.
And in the eventuality we do have a Trump versus Clinton showdown, which strategy do you think would be most successful for Hillary Clinton to use? Do you think she would be playing do you think playing dirty would actually help her case, or do you think that taking the moral high ground would suit her better?
Moral high ground and Clinton don't always go together. I know.
The antithesis of moral high ground.
Yeah.
But, well, I would say the antithesis, but there are problems there. There are vulnerabilities there. I think she's best off trying to be dignified. There'll be other people who will attack Trump, but I think there'll be very good research into his difficulties, into the problems of his business, into his contradictions, to do a lot of fact testing. I mean, it's not going to be, it's going to be one-on-one. It's going to be very, very, very tough. I think if she gets, she's just not as good in the trenches as he is. This is a guy who loves picking out what he thinks of people's vulnerabilities and going after them like a schoolroom bully. And she can be tough, but when she gets angry, she tends to be strident, and that doesn't go over very well with people either. So, I would expect her to try to stay a little bit above the dirt. I mean, she can't stay above the fray, but and let other people sling the mud for her.
So just to close, I think on looking past the election to if Hillary Clinton is the new president of the United States, do you think that having followed a strategy of obstructionism and severe opposition that someone like Bo Kagan or Robert Kagan said produced Donald Trump, do you think the Republicans during the next 4 years will take a different tactic?
It's hard to know. I mean, first of all, Kagan's not a very representative Republican, right?
Right.
But, I mean, I think the party will have to think hard about where it's going, because people actually want government to do stuff. I think part of what bothers people is the sense that even kind of normally sensible ideas are being rejected out of hand. I mean, someone like Paul Ryan, who's now, a senior person in Congress, I think wants to get business done. And if Hillary wins, the Democrats may win back the Senate. So I think you'll get a little bit less divided government in the beginning.
At least be a Supreme Court nominee.
Well, there'd have to be, you know what I mean. And the Republicans will just have to think hard about, I think they'll start thinking first, as they always do, about their process. I mean, how they nominate people. Right? And they're certainly going to have to look at, what Trump attracted and whether that's something that they feel comfortable with. And I suspect the Democrats have to think too. I mean, this is really new territory. And, I don't pretend to completely understand it. But we'll see how it plays out. In the end, I do feel, as I said, Americans do take the presidency seriously and they take their vote seriously. This part is fun, but the primary campaigns, you get a lot of bozos and a lot of entertainment, but in the end, people know it's a pretty serious business, and a lot of people don't decide until the very, very end.
And should Trump be the one who comes runner-up to President Hillary Clinton, do you think Trump is going to be happy going back into the fold of business and being a business magnate, or do you think he is going to try and stay in politics in some shape or form?
I don't know. You'd have to read into his mind. My guess is that he just considered a great adventure and go back to managing his business, but because he doesn't have the patience to kind of work at it for another 4 years waiting for another chance. That's not the kind of guy he, But look, to me, almost every politician is a flawed personality. Trump seems to me almost, I have to be careful what I say, but he'd be a very interesting psychological study. My guess is he's having a lot of fun. My guess is in his real life, he's a little more sensible and balanced. He understands what trading is about. But there's no question he's an extraordinary narcissist and a bit of a bully. And, we'll see whether the American people want that sort of personality as their president. Okay?
Okay.
Great.
Thank you very much,
Thanks so
Mr.
much.
Erlanger.
You're very, very welcome.